Hello everyone, it's the Sky Priestess. Now it's been a while since I did my previous video because, as all of you would know, I had COVID and then I had to go for throat surgery, which was very unexpected, and then I had to be fed, through a tube running through my nose for something like 10 days, and all of that just meant I needed to take time to be able to even speak. So this is a little bit of a recap of what happened, but at the same time it's also a very powerful segue or context for the upcoming new moon in Gemini, conjunct Polaris, opposite the Galactic Center, conjunct Juno, squaring Neptune and Ceres, which I know is a mouthful, but that is what is happening. And the reason why my experiences during this very, very intense and rather risky time in my healing process relate to this one. From an astrological perspective, it is because of Neptune in the Galactic Center. When all of this stuff went down for me, we had Neptune exactly squaring the Galactic Center, and we will continue to see that aspect being triggered now all the way till the end of 2024. So there's time to learn these lessons. And as it is usually the case for me, I tend to learn it first wave, first hit, but in a very intense way that can be quite tough to recover from. But this same alignment is what is informing the new moon that we have coming up on June the 18th. So I'm going to take my time and I'm going to explain what happened and the different aspects of it, and then connect it to what all of us are going to be experiencing very soon. Now bear in mind, this is my subjective view. I will never tell you that there is some kind of absolute truth out there, or that my system is the best, or that I know the most, because all of that is just bullshit. But I can tell you what I know from the truth of my being, and if that resonates with you, great. And if it doesn't, also okay. So let's get started. Now, in the first week of June, I had, me and my brother both contracted COVID. And we have already been dealing with significant health issues because we suspect we may have caught it in just when the lockdowns went down. And because it's just the two of us, and Malaysia was having a very strict policy on people who were confirmed positive. They were basically forced into these large medical facilities. And that was not something that either of us really wanted to do. Home quarantine was not even given as an option initially. So, we figured that we already had several of the more long-term, long COVID symptoms. And so this was not entirely new. But what had happened this time around is that we got in the more common acute infection. And, it was things like 40 degrees fever, intense itchiness like you're having blades in the throat, finding it very hard to swallow, loss of smell, loss of taste, loss of hearing, intense pain, and all kinds of stuff. So we had the really, really nasty version this time. And, I'm not going to get into what jab, who did this, who did that. I don't need anyone's advice on that. No offense, but this is a country that does have access to more perspectives on health than what is practiced in the United States. So, I'm not going to get into that, because the moment I talk about this, I see people wanting to bring in the agenda, and I'm drawing a very clear line on that. I will delete any comments that are trying to push one camp or another. So we had been taking very strong precautions so we wouldn't have to deal with this in the first place. But after years, we decided to go to a concert, and that is what that got us. But it was probably one of those things that were timed, I knew something health-wise was going to come up. In terms of the stars and astrology, I just did not know what and why. And so when the very, very acute phase of infection happened, I remember lying down. I was feeling hot and cold at the same time. I kept trying to sleep, and I kept getting pulled into dreams and having the equivalent of delirium. I think it was basically just, delirium and fever. But I was seeing things that I could also work with at a spiritual and psychic level. And of course, I was not this calm. When it was actually happening, it was just like, what's going on? Why? And when I had a little bit of, the fever had lessened and I had a little bit more presence of mind, I could look at what I was seeing, what I was feeling, and process it the same way I deal with health issues, which is from a very holistic perspective, which also acknowledges spiritual traditions. So, as someone who has some background and understanding of the philosophies of East Asian medicine or TCM as one aspect of it, I understood which meridians were being affected, and my brother being someone who can read pulses, he was also quick, and both of us basically also studying what was happening at the same time and how different it was compared to other things that we had seen before. So I was focusing on processing the symptoms, the emotions from a spiritual and holistic perspective. And you know what? It actually worked really well. It worked really well in the sense that I got over those very acute symptoms fairly quickly. But that is not what floored me. But I will tell you what I learned when we talk about what happened, the astrology of it, and it's more towards the summary. But after that, as I was drinking some herbal soup, as I still couldn't taste much, couldn't feel much, I accidentally ended up swallowing a part of a root, and that hurt my neck. What I could feel, I knew something was wrong. So I basically just made sure that we ran to the government hospital here in the middle of the night, and they did scans immediately. And that is one good thing about this country. It has other things, but this is one good thing. Medical facilities here compared to other places are relatively cheap. And, you get a lot. So, they found that there was something there and they insisted that I had to be admitted. But they couldn't make out what it was. So it was decided that the best way to proceed was to basically have surgery that would explore what's going on in my larynx and my windpipe. And everything was okay. I am someone who does not like hospitals. I do not like the lack of control over one's, physical choices. I do not like the confinement, and I certainly do not like proximity with people that is enforced. So, which is one of the reasons why I avoid it as much as possible. I am not someone who enjoys that. And they're explaining the risks to me, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right, fine. But when I got to the anesthesiologist, and he actually took one look and he realized that people forgot to mention I had stuff like sleep apnea, or what my physical structure and build was, and he said this is actually a pretty high risk surgery for you. Are you sure you want to do this, and so on and so forth. Well, and we actually got to talking about options. Now, he wasn't trying to fearmonger me, but I could actually see he was the only one who connected the dots. As it is a government hospital, unfortunately, for what you pay, the service is commensurate. They didn't really take on board the fact that I kept saying, look, I just recovered from COVID. This is the case history. And they just, ran on what they thought they saw on a scan. So I had a conversation with the anesthesiologist, and at that time I had to decide, do I want to take this procedure, which for me in my health condition was actually pretty risky. And I could not reach my brother on the phone. And I tell you what, I cried. And I don't cry that easily for things like this, because I was honestly scared. And I did not have anyone to turn to at that time. And I said, okay. But the thing that had supported me, the principles of healing, of presence, of focus, that had supported me through the more acute and painful phase of the COVID, that snapped in. Like a trained muscle, that snapped in. And as scared as I was, I realized, no, I have to do this. We have to figure out what's the problem. I'm going to go with faith, and I'm just going to breathe. So I did. And thankfully things went well, though I did have some abrasions and lacerations, and there were minor issues. It wasn't super smooth. But after that, I still needed to have a tube fed through, running through my nose, which I had to feed myself through something like 8 times a day with just liquid milk for 10 days. So it was not a small thing. And I can tell you one thing, I do not like being woken up every 3 or 4 hours to drink milk. But it was an experience in and of itself. Being in the hospital was also like a war. The things were not particularly hygienic. There was very little privacy in the wards. And, stay up at night listening to people cough and hack blood and all kinds of things. It was low-key horror movie in many ways. And because my brother is here taking care of the little fellows who were understandably very, very, very worried, and how some of those of you who know them know how sensitive they are. I was doing my best to keep working on psychic defense with the support that I have, making sure that everyone is fine, everyone is cool, and there's not any gaps in the field, so to speak. So, I couldn't see my brother, and I just basically sit there by myself. And I had to also deal with very unsympathetic nurses and a lot of doctors who simply did not want to hear or want to speak to me in a way that was humanized. And mind you, I did give one of them a run for their money. They had no idea who I was, and because I was asking questions, and saying, hey, could I get some pain? My bed has been kept upright for 3 days continuously. I have a history of fibromyalgia. They did not like it, and started to talk to me in a very fake hoity-toity American accent. Well, that doesn't work on me. Let's just say I got the doctor running out the door within a minute, but I got my medication. So, small battles there, but also a lot of people just projecting so much of fear, so much of negativity towards me, especially from the nurses. And it really was having to hold my peace and hold my space in a situation where everything was pushing against me. It was a lot of energy trying to make me feel small, trying to make me feel, like malleable in a certain way, which really should not be happening in a situation of care, but it does happen. My race is probably a part of it, and the fact that I was independent is also another part of it. But either way, I got out, and my brother helped me when I was able to come back to the house, and the poor guy was also waking up to make this milk mixture and feed it down the tube with a syringe, and that was a different experience. But that's what happened. That's what happened, and that's what's taken us such a long time to recover from. I am getting back to sessions now, but I think I can only maybe do 1 session a day, just to make sure I don't overdo it. But the lessons that I learned through all of this, especially with that Neptune Galactic Center square that ran through all of this, those lessons are lessons that I will never forget in my life. And I really saw who my true support was, who my true family is. I saw how important it was for me to advocate for myself, but to also know when to kind of keep it low-key, smile and nod, and wait for the opportunity to move. And it was like this constant chess match in many ways. And throughout all these experiences, what I learned about myself most of all, and it's something that those of you who have been following me for a long time already know, I have always felt that spirit was greater than any system of knowledge or human divination, which includes all astrological systems, and I have looked in quite a few. And I found that all of that knowledge, all of that stuff is not what got me through this. Had I lost faith for a moment, the outcome would be very different. I might have been physically okay, but emotionally and spiritually not okay. Had I given in to the doubt, the fear, had I given in to my own anxieties, it would be a completely different experience, and I would not be able to be speaking the way I am to you at this time. It was a real challenge. And that to me sustained me, and what I felt, what I forged through fire in many ways, is what I have been refining in my own work, in my own journey, in my own practice since I started in 2013. So, trial by fire, and here I am. But so thank you, all of you who have been worried, who have sent well wishes, who have sent financial support. That has been a great anchor to take away a lot of the pressures, that which can be taken away. And it also helps me see that I have done good work in the world, to be so loved in the world. I had so many hooks come my way, things that were trying to push me back to people in my past, things that were trying to make me, less connected with my own source energy. And I just kept at it, and I just kept being, and that worked. But moving to the here and now, one of the reasons why these lessons are coming up so strongly is that this same Neptune galactic square aspect is being lit up right now in the build-up to an extraordinarily powerful new moon conjunct Polaris and opposite the Galactic Center. So you can imagine, in fact, the new moon is conjunct Juno, Polaris. It's opposed to Galactic Center. It squares Neptune and Ceres. It has angles to various other bodies in the skies. But it is the same lesson, and it is coming up once again in a slightly different context. So that's why I wanted to give you a bit of the backstory. The new moon in Gemini is going to be taking place on June the 18th. And it is all about setting seeds. Gemini, to me, is the freedom that comes as you discover truth. And sometimes to discover that truth, you have to look at quite a few of them. If you just learn one or two things, you're not likely to have an accurate picture of reality. Gemini can be very freeing in its ability to look at different perspectives, but it can get lost when it starts collecting info for the sake of collecting info without really evaluating it. And this new moon in Gemini, conjunct Polaris, the pole star, is an opportunity for us to really be collecting information and experiences that guide us to true north. And this was what was pushed very, very hard for me throughout my medical ordeal. What is my true north, and how can I best access that? And that's going to be, I hope, it depends on your level of sensitivity, but I hope all of you take this opportunity to really be working with that question over the next few days, because it's not just one day. The influence of this new moon spans quite a few days because there are multiple alignments that keep reinforcing themselves connected to the new moon. For those of you who want the full details, you can, of course, join my Tier 23 program, because that's where I go into a little bit more of the specifics. But this is the core information which is required. As we are all charting and navigating and looking at what our true north is, so to speak, not everyone is going to arrive at things in the same way. Not everyone is going to have the same values. And collectively, we are also making a decision towards what we believe is real, and what we believe is valuable, and what we believe is worth existing for. And all of these deep and profound opportunities come up. These questions come up, and opportunities to set seed in response to these questions come up in the next few days. And I have personally found that the energy of Gemini, I'm sure this is true for anyone who really sits with the archetypes in astrology and looks at it very, very closely. What I have found with the energy of Gemini is that more information comes, or rather more truth comes, when you stop actively seeking, but rather when you are being. And very often, because we do not immediately get the answers by sitting still, people kind of get caught up in that frantic rush of needing to fill their cups, even if what they are filling them with isn't really what they're looking for. And that's a big risk. So rather than collecting for the sake of collecting, focus more on presence, focus more on breath, focus more on being. To me, the greatest teacher that you can have is your own individual connection with your heart, with your breath and what you might call your soul or your spirit. Because the clearer you are with this, automatically the clearer you are with what people might call God, goddess, divinity, creator, creatrix. And my own journey has been a process of radical consolidation. I don't want to say simplification because there is complexity to it, but a lot has been stripped away. And whether it's religion or philosophy or astrological systems, I see a lot of this as paraphernalia and accessories that one does not actually require when you are willing to sit and deeply listen. And for me, that test, so to speak, came in, it happened many times, but I would say the most dangerous and intense test came through this medical ordeal. And here is what I did. And I know it's not glamorous, and it's not something that you can sell, books about, or not that many at the very least. But all I did was sit and listen and breathe. I wasn't trying to force anything. I wasn't trying to push anything. I just kept breathing and I just kept listening. And when I felt down, I'm not going to say I did this all alone, but the guidance given to me was very clear. It was just to breathe and to say out loud that I am a blessed child of God, or the universe, or divinity, or goddess, or whatever word you want to use. And that reminder was enough, to be honest. That reminder was able to keep away some of the darkest and deepest fears, not just from this lifetime. And that reminder was enough to keep that little flame of hope alive through very, very desperate situations, psychologically speaking, at the very least. And I knew that just sitting with this simple affirmation, in the simple act of breathing and listening, was honestly more than enough. And I can say that it has taught me more than anyone has ever been able to teach me. And that is all you truly need to do. But people like their crutches. And I'm not saying I've never used them. People like their crutches. People like templates, they like maps, they like things that can say this is what's happening, that's what's happening, and to have a sense of mastery and knowing over them. And yes, that is partially what astrology is for. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it's a system which, irrespective of which type of astrology you use, it tells you about cosmic currents. It tells you when the tides are going to be high, when the tides are going to be low. And if you look closely enough, where you're going to have some rocky waters and where things are calm or maybe deceptively calm. But none of that can actually teach you what to do when you are thrown into the deep waters and there is no light and you don't know what's brushing against your leg, but you need to push up and keep swimming. That literally happened to me a couple of years ago too. Though at that time I was less calm. But it is all about what you do in that moment to survive, to whether it's stay afloat or doggy paddle your way to safety. That's something that no one can teach you from an external source. And I'm not saying everyone's journey has to be as dramatic, but to some extent, everyone would have had those kinds of moments in life. So don't get hung up about who says what. Find what is your true north. Find what is your true center. And the challenge is not letting your ego mind fill the gaps, because gaps are uncomfortable. Ambiguity and uncertainty is something that, the ego doesn't like. Don't let yourself fill the gaps when you don't have the answers. Just allow yourself to accept, this is where I am right now. This is what I'm doing right now. This is what I think right now. This is the way I feel right now. And it is okay. Make that an affirmation if it helps. But the more you actually bring this into your breath, The more you slow down, the more you observe rather than react, rather than try to find an immediate solution or answer, the closer you are to what I would understand at the very least as spirit. And it has helped me. And that helps me help others. I remember, and I do see, I don't want to, name any names because everyone's on their path and journey, but I do see people who, rather than guiding others to pure spirit, they're going back. They're trying to find old things that existed before, whether it's in astrology or spirituality or mythology or all combinations thereof, to teach them about their lives when none of that is actually necessary. For those of you who've joined me on this journey since I publicly started it in 2013, it's been 10 years and I've been quite consistent in what I've said. Astrology is a crutch. The more we actually align with the truth of spirit, the less we will actually need this. And I see that in my life. And I know that I won't be able to do this work very long because it just seems, it just doesn't feel right. And I'm not being ableist. I have a walking cane. I have a walking cane. Sometimes you do need it. But when you actually get into that habit of living very deeply from your heart, a lot of the times you don't need that philosophical crutch. You don't need to be relegating your idea of destiny or fate to some quote-unquote divine or planetary being out there that you can make contracts and negotiations with. You can already do all of that stuff on Earth. You don't need to make that part of your quote-unquote higher aspects. But it takes a lot to be able to walk away from those crutches when you truly no longer need them. And that's going to be one of the themes that's going to come up with this new moon conjunct Polaris. What is your true north? What is the way you actually, how, with what ideas, with what words, with what silences, with what breaths do you actually want to navigate? Whatever it is you understand as truth. And again, this is my subjective view from my experiences. I don't talk about things that I haven't done or haven't experienced because it's BS. You have to live through it to actually know it. But go with what resonates with you. Go with what resonates with your experience of life. But my only advice to you is this: don't do it from here. The more you give in to intellectual stimulation, the more you confuse knowledge with wisdom, the further you get from what we can call spirit. And this is a very powerful test for people, especially as they are actively seeking something, especially, in a time where there's a program for this, there's a technique for this, there's a course for this, there's a title for this, that commodification of spirituality that I have spoken of so often over the years, that makes things seem like there's an easy fix to problems. No. Sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. But until you take the time to breathe and observe and understand, you may not realize that what was actually a problem is just part of context. But, I wanted to touch base. I wanted to share what's been going on with me, why I have been not doing videos, giving you a little bit of an update, effectively speaking, and also connect it back to a very extraordinary alignment for all of us. Find what is the practice, the truth, the breath, the moment that brings you to true north. Keep this in your mind if you need a focus. If some of you can hear it and you're processing subconsciously, but if you need to bring yourself back to focus, bring it back to this idea and see where you are guided. What I have found in my life is that everything I thought I knew with any degree of certainty was not what I thought it was. I'm someone who likes to learn. I'm someone who likes to learn. I'm someone who actively challenges myself. I'm someone who seeks out good teachers when I can find them if they resonate with me. And I honestly find that my understanding of spirit and the universe required me to empty the cup rather than constantly try to fill it. And these are things that I've been working on for years. So, in some sense, try to keep your cup as empty as possible, and you will know when it's time to fill it and with what resonates best with the truth of who you are. So having said that, I also want to finish on a note with respect to Juno. This new moon is also going to be conjunct Juno, which I know people call the marriage partner, they call the soulmate. Yes, but I actually read mythology and look at the original sources. Juno was not in the happiest of relationships, nor would she be an archetype of what I would call a lovingly married partner. In practice, when I see Juno aspected strongly in charts, it simply means that there is a very deep soul connection with the person that you're interacting with. It is not a moral statement. It is not a guarantee of happily ever after. It is an acknowledgement that you and they have a certain alchemy that occurs. And whether that's something that's painful or whether it's something that's beautiful or both, that depends on your journey. But what you will find with this new moon is the true soul community. Whether it's friends, whether it's lovers, whether it's family, whether it's people you knew from way back when. The people who are meant to be in that soul connection with you are going to be resonant with your path and vice versa. Do not hold yourself back in the name of wanting to hold on to a soulmate. That does not work. Because the more you hide yourself, the more you suppress yourself, the more you limit your access to your innate being, you will create a pressure on whatever connection you're trying to save. Having said that, some of us will have the privilege, and I mean this not in an institutional way, but some of us, or rather, will have the rare gift to have soul connections who do align with the courageous, with the with the transformative energies of now that require us to let go of the past and the old timelines that have existed from there. Not everyone is going to be able to do that because the ego mind likes a sense of continuity. And some will manage it. But some soul connections may not survive that particular leap. So be very, very aware of that. And if that is the situation you find yourself in, wish them well with compassion. And you never know. It's a huge universe. You don't know what your particular soul's cycle of incarnation is, generally speaking. You might encounter them again later in this life or in a different time. But either way, do not compromise your truth for that connection. What is yours cannot be taken from you. It's very simple. And what is not yours cannot be held on to by you without suffering significant consequences. Having said that, that brings things to a wrap. I do hope that this has been useful. I know that the pacing is different from my usual pieces because that is also the lungs and the breath needing to recalibrate. It takes work to speak. It takes work to eat. It takes work to breathe. And whilst I'm getting better and better each day, pacing is important. So having said that, take care. Very many blessings. If you have any questions, write it in the comments below, and if I'm able to, I'll answer you. If you need a reading, you can find and basically book in a session. As I said, I'm only doing one session a day, but those options are available. And if you want to be part of a community of souls who have chosen to journey together in this very interesting way that I'm navigating, then join the Tier 23 program. Having said that, take care. Very many blessings. Lots of love to all of you, and cha-cha for now. Bye-bye.